Hi everybody, Dana Lotwin here again, and welcome back to Tuesday Tips for Leaders of Volunteers. This is Earth Day week. You might have done Earth Day activities with your organization, whether your mission is directly connected to conservation or climate change mitigation, or just as a fun group event, community group, faith group, corporate group event, drop-in type of episodic event. But there is a better way to have your volunteer Earth Day events have real impact on mitigating and slowing climate change, and it maybe is not the way you think. So a little background if you don't know me in real life, but most of my career has been with conservation agencies and land trusts, and some of those have been nonprofits, and a lot of those have been government agencies. So this is really a topic that is near and dear to my heart and a huge part of my life from volunteering with beach cleanups as a little kid. So the reality of having a positive impact or slowing climate change is that it's at a very large industrial, corporate, even militaries of the world level. So it's a very, very big systemic change that has to happen to stop fossil fuel consumption, cease plastic production and consumption, and many other layers to it that are more than just a one-time beach cleanup. So the sad reality of climate change is that and this comes from many studies, but I'll link specifically to one from 2017 that's sadly still relevant, where really 100 companies, 100 global corporations are really doing the most environmental and climate change negative impact damage in the world. And the campaign for the last 50 or so years by fossil fuel companies, soda companies, bottled water companies, plastic producing companies, has really been a campaign to shift larger systemic responsibility or corporate or government responsibility to regulate pollutants, has really put it on an individual level. And I grew up with this, and I was kind of enculturated to think, oh, if I don't use a plastic straw, if I recycle cans and plastic bottles, that will help. And factually, it doesn't. We're kind of nibbling around the edges, but that doesn't have any real impact on the damage that is being done to accelerate climate change with fossil fuels and plastics use. So how does that relate to volunteers doing Earth Day events? Well, it absolutely can still be very valuable to do local Earth Day events, especially if you're not a conservation agency yourself that you work with, that you're partnering with climate change mitigation, local land trusts, parks and open space, things, community gardens, local food access, anything like that has a local impact to your local community. Of course, that's helpful. That's helpful if you're doing a beach or creek or park cleanup. That has an immediately helpful effect. And it's not bad to do volunteer Earth Day things. I still encourage it. It's a great way to do community engagement. Many episodic volunteers can be converted into regularly or recurring volunteers for your organization, and I've talked about that before. But here are my tips for making your next year's 2025's and beyond Earth Day impacts even better, having a real ripple effect. So volunteers doing direct action, doing political campaigning, political pressure, protest, that's what's going to be really the most effective, is pushing for large systemic changes with people power, and volunteers amplifying that. If you can amplify that impact not only just with education and information campaigns for the volunteers that are doing your maybe drop-in Earth Day event, but really we need to keep the pressure on regulation and companies and governments and also militaries, worldwide militaries, especially the America being the biggest one, are doing some of the most environmental damage of all. But we have to keep up a community political pressure to make these really big systemic changes, and that's just a part of the equation that we're working with. One of the things you can do is not just educate volunteers on the immediate impact of the local project that they're doing for Earth Day, but talk about these bigger issues, because a lot of people just don't know. There's been very effective marketing campaigns, like I said, of these super duper large global corporations to shift the attention away from their actions, or to greenwash themselves and think, oh, it's an individual responsibility to buy less of our product and less of our plastic. And that's really, that's been a big sad greenwashing that's hindered the progress we could have been making getting into renewable energy faster. So when you're specifically working with volunteers on an Earth Day event, partner with a local conservation corps, climate change, direct action organization, and either have that partnership directly involved with planning the event and the maximum impact of that event, and or use a micro-volunteering app or a company. You can have volunteers install the app, or you can be in partnership with companies that do micro-volunteering to direct climate action. You can also invite volunteers if you're not a government agency, because government agencies typically, at least in the US, can't do direct campaigning. But if you're a nonprofit agency or doing a mutual aid activity, things like that, are kind of more spontaneous, informal volunteering, then absolutely direct volunteers to, there's more and more very easy links to political campaigns, to support green groups. Again, not just micro donation volunteering for the time they're doing, but perhaps partnering with some local corporate partners to say, hey, can you match donations to our volunteers to these entities that are really doing, really trying to move the needle on climate change and mitigation. I'm also super excited that there's the rise of conservation corps again, of the California Climate Corps, AmeriCorps is making some efforts in that area, and America's state commissions are making efforts in that area. But in California, especially because we're one of the areas most impacted by climate change with wildfires and mudslides and ocean rise, that I'm excited that there is at least political action on the state level and more on the federal level to take this as a larger problem that it is, that kind of nibbling around the edges just hasn't gotten the job done. So you can make your Earth Day volunteer events for next year, fun, productive, educational. Doing local good is helpful, but tie it into a global movement or a global event, or again, writing a quick email or a letter with a link to local politicians to divest from fossil fuels, to switch over to renewable energy and job training programs and things like that. If you add that into your group activity, I think everyone's going to learn a lot more and feel that their impact is potentially a lot more meaningful than just the local activity that you're doing. So I hope you enjoy these Tuesday tips. Tune in next week for more, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel, share this video, like it, and hit the little bell to learn when I upload new videos, not just Tuesday tips. Take care.